Weekly Power Lounge. This is your place to hear authentic conversations from those who have power to share. My name is Amy Vaughn, and I am the owner and Chief Empowerment Officer of Together Digital, a diverse and collaborative community of women who work in digital and choose to share their knowledge, power, and connections. You can join the movement at togetherindigital.com. Today, we have a very special guest. I'm super excited for all of you to meet. Brooke, she is no stranger to our community as she will be our closing keynote speaker for our upcoming Illuminate National Conference happening October 17th. I'm excited and I hope that all of you take the chance and the time to come and join us in Cincinnati for that. But for right now, we have the privilege of having a more intimate conversation with Brooke as she shares powerful insights on a very critical topic, challenging the toxic grind culture that has far too long been glorified. Brooke Daniels brings over 15 years of experience working at top companies like Salesforce Ventures. But beyond her impressive corporate background, she has faced her own battles with burnout and loss of purpose. I know this is going to sound familiar to some of you who are listening. So I hope you are tuned in and ready to take some notes and maybe ask some questions, live listeners. Throughout that journey, Brooke has witnessed the transformative power of prioritizing wellness. And now, as the founder of the Holistic Hustle and a Deepak Chopra certified coach, Brooke is on a mission to provide us with actionable steps to break free from the pressure filled hustle mindset. She'll reveal some concrete practices to integrate self care, unlock our potential, and redefine success. This conversation couldn't be more timely, as a lot of us are really experiencing a lot of what I just shared. And Brooke's insights are a much needed wake up call, which is why we're excited to have her here today with us. And we're excited to have her again as our closing keynote speaker for our conference. So, everyone, let's get ready to dive in and hear what Brooke has to share. Welcome, Brooke.
Thank you so much, Amy. I'm super excited to be here and excited to also join you for the conference in October, which will be
Yeah.
here in no time. It's like six
I
weeks
know.
away.
Oh my gosh, I'm getting like it's like that skited. It's scared and excited all at the same time. I love it. It's like always ends up being the best day, but as anybody who plans events knows, it doesn't matter every year. It's just the same anxiety, but then at the end of the day comes and it's just ugh, it's a beautiful experience. And Brooke, as soon as I, received your information and learned more about you and your background and what you do, I just thought, gosh, yeah, she's so aligned with our community and what we talk about and what we do because we have a lot of very hardworking, focused, driven women that are just dealing with and balancing a lot of things. So, yeah, I couldn't think of somebody better to have join us on the Power Lounge. And as I said, to close us out at the conference. But to start off, why don't you give our listeners a little bit more about your background and your career journey so far and what kind of led you from Silicon Valley to your current role as the founder of Holistic Hustle?
Absolutely. And I'll take a quick tour through, but I always like to start it out and just grounding where I'm from, which is
Mhm.
a town called Rock Hill, South Carolina. I was actually a broadcast major, German minor. So German's the only other language I'm fluent in beyond English. And at one point I thought I wanted to be a reporter. And I share that because I think so many times in our life, we feel like we can't attain something or go
Mhm.
somewhere we want to go because of where we start. And so people are like, "You're a liberal arts major, but you ended up as a venture capitalist?"
Yeah,
Like, yeah,
I can.
absolutely. Right. Everybody's path looks different.
Yes.
So I always humbly share where my roots started at. But after coming back from doing a year long immersion program in Germany. It was like a youth state department ambassador program.
Mhm.
I stumbled into tech. Didn't know what SAP was. We were working on a deployment at that time. My manager told me to go buy a book and figure out what it was. Which, if you know what SAP is, this is a massive technology system, right? Not like floppy disk or anything like that. And upon coming back to the US, I started working in telecom sales at AT&T, and they
Mhm.
transferred me out to Napa Valley. And so I had no idea really that there was this vibrant, booming tech scene happening. It was just so far removed from my life sphere, and bumped into who would be my next a boss at a Starbucks, and he pretty much recruited me to come work for his tech company that was a private tech company, and that's how I got into Silicon Valley Tech. And so worked at this pre-IPO company as an early employee. I was employee 65, was before we took on private equity money, and so a very special time, and led the initiative to start our customer success program. And then after that, I went into sales and helped launch new markets. And then from there, after I got my MBA, became a practice group lead. And so by this time, the company has gone through all of this M&A activity. We've launched all of these new products. And so I've kind of been getting a firsthand look, at what actually happens in high growth tech companies because I've just been living it for 7 years.
Mm,
Um, and at that point, I was reporting to COO. I had a really good run, but I felt like I wanted to see tech at scale
mhm.
and had a really good friend at Salesforce who convinced me to come over, and I joined in a go to market role. And part of this will kind of tie into my journey with burnout, but ended up going over to a business unit we acquired called MuleSoft. It was at that time the largest acquisition in Salesforce's history, and I helped with some of the joint M&A activity and also go to market, which is why we were traveling so heavily at that time. I think my peak was probably 75 to 80% of the time. So on the road every single week.
Wow.
Um, and then at that point was really when I did hit burnout, and I will
Mm,
revisit that burnout story. And that's what led me to really start thinking about more purposeful work versus just kind of moving up the sales ladder, which is the path that I was on. And so that's why I wanted to go into venture capital. I have such a passion for equitable access to capital. I think
mhm.
people are so smart. So many people have great ideas, but unfortunately, we all don't have the same access to resources or
Yes.
networks. And I'm
Yes.
sure you will tell people, Amy, as a business owner yourself, that
Mhm.
is the difference, right? Many times
Yes.
between success or failure.
100%. Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
so
On the
that's what took me to venture capital, was wanting to be on the other side of the table of the venture capital industry. For people that don't know it, less than 2% of the trillions of dollars that invested
yeah.
go to women and minorities combined.
Yeah.
Combined. That's insane, right? And
Sad.
so just felt like I wanted to be on the side of the table to help create more opportunity for people that look like me and for
Yeah.
more women and minorities to be able to get that access and help their dreams come true.
I love that so much. And this is always my favorite question to ask. And it's always where we start, exactly for the reason you shared, is that no one's trajectory or career's like path is ever straight and narrow and set. And you can definitely major in one thing and then end up kind of growing and learning new skills and transferring them into another. And this conversation comes up over and over and over again, but somehow it doesn't always sink in for us ladies. So I'm just going to keep harping on it until maybe at some point I start hearing it in my one-on-one conversations and like coaching and mentoring within our peer groups. But I love that. And I also love what you're doing within venture capital. Gosh, that could be like a whole nother conversation for sure, because like you said, it's a very limiting space for those who don't have like access to the connections to. And I think that's where you and I sync up well too, is like I'm a huge proponent of networking and relationship building. And I think we as women tend to kind of avoid it because like sales, it feels a little icky at times to us maybe, but it's really more of a mindset. But it's so critical because it's not what you know always, it's who you know, it's being at the right time in the right place with the right people that can take your idea from nothing to absolutely something. And it's an advantage that I would really wish. I agree with you. I wish more people would have.
It's true. We have to
Yeah.
adopt that mindset.
Hmm.
I feel like earlier for a lot of folks in our career, usually we hit, a moment where it's like, oh yeah, this is, but we should just always be selling. And I tell
Yeah.
people all the time what the mindset shift for me in sales
Hmm.
was around not thinking of it as like, oh, I'm selling someone something that they probably don't need or they don't
Right.
want, but more so just focusing on the impact.
Hmm.
And if it's not something that you think is impactful to people, then don't sell it.
Right.
Whether it's your own
Yeah.
product or someone else's or service.
Yeah.
But if you believe in it, then you
Hmm.
know that you're gonna help someone with something that they could really be struggling with. And so if you can stay in that mindset
I
versus the
love it.
put feeling like you're pushing something, it helps a ton.
I agree. I agree. I found that too for those who struggle with like public speaking. I was at a public speaking like coaching event with Michael and Amy Port. Heroic Public Speaking. Check him out. It's really awesome. And one of the things he said that really helped me, not that I had a ton of problems with public speaking, I just didn't always like the light shown on me so much when I was dealing with all of that. He was like, think about not the fact that you are up there on stage. Think about the experience that you're creating for people and the moments and the opportunities that you're creating for folks by getting up and sharing your story and being vulnerable and putting all that you have into it. And that helped motivate me find the right kind of motivation. I think that's the key, right? It's like finding like what is your true core like value and motivation, whether it be sales or public speaking. And then you're like, oh, okay, yeah, I'm doing this to help them reach a goal or feel inspired or feel informed. And so honestly, like the nerves kind of go away a little bit more when I think about it from that angle because it's like, oh, what have I got to lose? I'm only trying to help them out, you know?
Right. Yeah.
In past conversations, you've mentioned that your time in corporate, you had personally experienced some burnout and loss of purpose. So let's dig into that a little bit more about what that period was like for you, and what made you realize a change was needed. We've talked a lot. I mean, this is a women's organization. We talk a lot about burnout. We're kind of burnout on burnout. We know it looks different for everyone. So how did it look and feel for you?
Definitely. And I'll keep it pretty brief. We don't have to beat it. I know we get to a point where sometimes it's like, we're kind of done talking about the problem. We want to talk
Yeah.
about the solution. But there is, to your point around public speaking, I do think there is benefit in all of us being able to connect and know we're not
Yeah,
alone with our
absolutely.
experiences. So for me, burnout hit in 2019. And really it was building over a very long time of just running sprinting for what was actually a marathon, do you know, in my career. And
Mm,
so at the height, I tell people I was traveling for my job, full time. And this was traveling at least probably at that point, 50 to 60% of the time. I was getting an executive MBA part
wow.
time, which required FaceTime. So we were in person every third weekend. My husband and I were launching a food truck because he was a chef.
Oh,
And so at the
fun.
same time, we're launching a food truck business.
Goodness.
And I was a coach for a competitive dance team. And so I was in the studio
Wow.
on the weekends around this like really crazy, insane schedule. And uh, nowhere in my mind did I not think that was normal.
Mhm.
And so that compounds, you just keep living at that pace, living at that pace. And by 2019, I was absolutely exhausted. And what that looked like was probably where I started to see it the most was in my personal relationships
Mm,
because I just had no time for anyone. I had no time
yeah.
for my husband. I had no time for my family. I had no time for myself. At that point, I had a really close friend that was going through a really tough life moment and really needed some support. And it was in that moment when I realized I was too broken to even be supportive to her
Yeah.
that I was like, "What do you know, what is going on in this moment?" That the
Yeah.
light bulb started to come on where I was recognizing my own burnout that I was dealing with and loss of purpose, and it was the same thing. I'd really shifted once I came back from Germany and kinda sharing that career story and getting into tech.
Mhm.
I'd really kind of pushed to the side passion because there was just so much opportunity, to break into
Mm,
Silicon Valley tech,
yeah.
and so I just shifted my mindset to say, "Hey, we're climbing this career ladder." I was very passionate about getting to the top. That's just always I've
Right.
always been ambitious, always wanted to be number 1. That's just part of who I am,
Yep.
and so I just kept working that way. But then you do that for 10 years, and when you pause, you're just so far away, right?
Yeah.
From who you are, where you
Mm,
started, what motivated you, and you're like,
yeah.
how did I even get here? Like, what am I doing?" And so, that's what happened for me. I had insomnia for years to the
Mm,
point where I would take sleeping aids to sleep, triple
yes.
quad latte in the morning to get it
Yep.
going. Um, and it just crashed, and then it got to the point from that recognition and that friend situation of, like, I actually can't show up for her because
Right.
I'm at a point of distress. That then led to me getting to such a severe point of burnout that I was becoming ineffective at working. So I would wake up and I'd have a hard time just getting out of bed, and
Yeah.
sometimes I'd sit in front of my laptop and I just could not focus or be productive, and it was
Mhm.
terrifying
Yeah.
because this way of working had worked for so long, and so I'm already hitting this crash and starting to realize I've gotta do things differently. My life is kinda crumbling. Then on the heels of that, we come into 2020. COVID,
Oh
right?
gosh, yeah.
And during COVID, I was actually working with the healthcare industry. So I was working with
Wow.
pharmaceutical companies. LabCorp was actually one of my clients at that time, and then also working with hospital systems.
Mhm.
And so we're in the mix trying to talk about technology. And every day we were like, lead with empathy, lead with
Yeah.
empathy. Lead. And it's like, what does that actually mean in this moment of like unknown crisis? And then a few months after that, my older sister passed away. She had a stroke
Mm.
at 39. And
Oh
so
gosh.
the burnout compounded with COVID and just everybody, I think, feeling that exhaustion when we paused,
Wow,
and then
yeah.
grief, all of those things combined is really what kicked off my wellness journey.
Wow. I am so sorry for your loss. That's yeah, that's so hard. And I can agree with you on that whole sense of blind ambition. I think for so long, right? We're conditioned and told this is the job, this is the salary, chase it, get it, all costs. Don't look back. Don't put your head up and look around. And it's so easy to get lost. And I think one thing I've learned throughout the last 4 or 5 years, kind of going through, experiences of up and downs with, family and business and life and COVID and all of that as well, is that it's like we're always in cycles and you're always living some kind of cycle and it's
Mhm.
either a good one or a bad one. And there's like the one that you need. So, like right before we got on this call, everyone, I was talking to Brooke about how I'm recovering from COVID this week. So, yay. But then like knowing that I need to get back to like my basics for a moment before I go like whole hog into like straight back to where I would like to be, which is working and focusing on our conference, etc. And my kids and soccer because we're coaching this year. Oh my goodness. So it's going to be really fun this weekend. But, I think looking at the cycle that you're in and seeing whether it's a good, healthy cycle. Are you getting your sleep? Are you getting your movement? Are you hydrating? Are you getting the time with family that you need for connection? Or is it nothing but work? And I worked to numb for so long. And my burnout was just pure numbness to like everything in the world, with the exception of anything that had to do with work. And like work was my fuel. And as soon as work got quiet, I got super anxious because I didn't know why. I was like, why am I here? What do I need to do? Why do I have a purpose? Do I have, and it's like, oh no, wait, this is not a healthy cycle. This is not a good way to be living. So I think recognizing the cycle that you're in, and all of us, we're going to kind of come in and out of that, right? No matter where we are in our wellness journey. But starting to see that where you are in that cycle, what does it look like? And then it's just for me, it's been like a series of constant like resets. But I'm excited to hear more about your thoughts on the grind culture too, because my agency background, your background and experience in tech and venture capital, it's very common, place for us to be working 60, 70 hours a week, traveling a ton. You put in the time, you put in the face time. That's how you climb, right? Is that you are there. And sometimes as a woman, as a mom, eventually, if that's a part of your plan, becomes a difficult thing. So how would you say that maybe grind culture became something that you decided to challenge the narrative and then maybe take a different approach on?
Definitely. I think it was when, again, and I hate that so many people have to hit that place
Yeah.
of rock bottom.
Yeah.
Like, I really want to meet people before. So
Right?
if you're not there, you don't have to go there to change. I really
Uh-huh.
don't want people to experience what I had to go
I
through
feel
because it's a
you.
climb out
Mhm.
of getting there. But it's when you start to really question the narrative and realize that those tactics of grind culture aren't sustainable.
Mhm.
It's when you really start to rethink what's out there. And the research really proves it, right? When you get into it. And so I guess one step back, I started going into, because now I would say holistic hustler is a combination of um, meditation, mindfulness, purpose strategies, but we combine that with flow state coaching. That's all around high performance. How do we get more done? How do we get into those flow states where we've been proven to be 500% more productive?
Mhm.
And so for me, when I started actually learning what the research shares with us about what's actually effective in productivity and getting more done. And then you look at all of these leaders out there, like at the top, and we're like, well, how come they're so relaxed, but they're CEOs over all these companies? And like, what is
Yeah.
it they're doing? And just about all of them will be very clear on their routine, how they
Mm.
start their day. They're doing
Yeah.
something they love. Meditation's usually involved, right? Then they're like, yeah, I've got, 4 hours of work time and then I've got this, but they're already adopting a lot of those practices. And so for me, it was learning, kind of stepping out of just what society has told us or just
Yes.
messages pushing down in corporate and saying, what is the actual research around productivity, flow states, being connected to purpose?
Mm,
And then you just have to have the courage to do it.
mhm.
And so I feel like we underestimate how much power we actually have in our lives. Maybe especially as women, if I could say that, because
Mhm.
so many people depend on us and
Yes.
we always tend to put ourselves last. And so
Mhm.
it's like, I've got to be the mom and I've got to
Right.
be a daughter and I've got to be a partner and all these different, I've got to be the great friend and I'm
Yeah.
the great worker
Yeah.
before I am just got to be, right?
Mhm.
And just changing that mindset. And then I think it's one of those things too, is like once you dip your toe in and you get a little bit, you're
Mhm.
like, this feels great.
Yeah.
Like, why haven't I been doing this forever? And it's that motivation you need to kind of keep doing it. And
Yeah.
then for me, it was like, I don't just want this for myself. I
Yes.
want it for my family. I want it for
Mhm.
everyone. And that's when I
Yes.
started kind of on my journey to coach.
I love this. I love all this so much. Yeah, because then you feel like some kind of crazy convert, right? Because then you're going around telling everybody, you're like, you just don't even know how amazing it is. And it's like you can actually have more time to sit back, reflect, be with yourself, be with your friends and family, be more present in your day to day, and then still get a crap load done. And then you're not, people are like, oh my God, I know you're so busy and you must be so tired. And you're like, yeah, no, no, actually, I'm okay. Like that to me is just kind of finding and really working what I wrote down as you were speaking. You just inspired this idea, this question of, are you running on the right kind of fuel? Like, are
I
you
love
run and
that.
to me, purpose is definitely a stronger fuel for so many of us than and our values than even our paychecks. I know our paychecks are essential and groceries are expensive and gas, it's all hard right now. But at the same time, like at the end of the day, we're still human and there's still needs beyond just even those more basic needs. And so to me, it's like flow state comes when you know that you're running on the right kind of fuel.
I
And
love
I
that.
think holistic hustle, it just sounds like such an awesome and much needed business and program for people to be looking into and checking out. If you're all sitting here nodding your heads along with us as they're speaking, going, "Oh my God, this sounds just like me," or heck, somebody else that I know. There's nothing wrong with a little friendly intervention. Checking in on your strong friends and saying, "Hey, I listened to this good podcast. You should take a listen to it." Just maybe because I think it's easier sometimes too for us to see it in others before we even see it in ourselves.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. And the power of the present, you spoke about that, but it's so
Mhm.
important. And I speak for myself, but also clients I've worked with. When you really pause and think about how much time we live in the future,
Yeah.
and the bulk of our stress actually comes from thinking about things in the future that haven't even happened yet,
Yep.
but the impacts that they have on our body are real.
Oh, yeah.
Like simulating all this stress around,
Mhm.
like I know everybody right now with inflation, everything that's going on, we're all thinking about runway, right? How much
Yep.
runway would we have and replaying this and but when you're constantly living there, like actually today, you know what? Everything's paid.
Yeah.
I'm healthy, everything's okay. And so
Mhm.
being able to embrace those moments without getting too caught up in too far into the future with the worst case
Yes.
scenarios is
Uh-huh.
like such a critical component to how we start to decrease stress,
Yeah.
release anxiety. Most people will be honest, most of their stress and anxiety comes from either thinking about things in the past or
Yep.
thinking about things in the future. It has nothing to do with the
Yeah.
present that's in front of them. And then not only are we releasing stress, but when we get present, all these other amazing things really happen. And so we just did with Holistic Hustler for book club, The Surrender Experiment,
Okay.
which is one of my absolute favorite books. It's by Michael
Awesome.
Singer.
Okay.
If you haven't, have you read that one, Amy?
No, sounds like my kind of jam though. I'll be checking it out. Was it the surrender what?
Surrender Experience,
Experience. Experiment. Okay.
Experiment. It's so good. It's literally the reason why my 2024 word is surrender
Oh,
for
I
the
love it.
year.
Yeah.
And it's really this guy who is in grad school recounting his story of how he found meditation
Mhm.
and started to surrender to what was in front of him and become present. And he ends up being the CEO of this like multi-million dollar company and like all these things happen in his life. But it actually came from a point of like being present so he could
Yeah.
see what was showing up in front of him and
Mhm.
then surrendering to those opportunities. And so when you're the thing is if you're not present, you can't do that, right? Like if you're
Right.
so locked into like what's on paper, this is the plan, I'm gonna go here,
Yeah.
you're missing all these things, right? That are being kind of signaled to you that are actually opportunities for you. And so the Surrender Experiment is like the number one book I recommend around just the power of being present and being looking at tomorrow with optimism
Mhm.
versus dread, like really being
Yeah.
excited about the unknown that's out there because you can surrender to
Yeah.
opportunities you can't even dream of. And I have so many personal stories, Amy, throughout that I just can share, do share with people of how that's shown up in my life in really big
Mhm.
ways. The
Mhm.
biggest things have happened were never things I could have planned. They
Mm.
happened
Yep.
for me.
I love that so much. Yes, of course, I'm checking it out. And Kaylee, thank you so much for dropping the link to the book so swiftly into our chat for our live listeners. We'll be sure to include that in the show notes as well, so all of you can check out the Surrender Experiment. I think that aligns and makes so much sense. I have a talk that I do about a mindful approach to burnout that talks about non-attachment,
Yeah.
non-judgment, non-attachment to big proponents there of, mindfulness in general. And it's like really making sure that you aren't overly attached to an outcome sometimes, because that, like you said, that means you could miss another opportunity altogether because you're so set on the way you think it should go versus the way it's really meant to unfold. And non-judgment meaning like as things happen, don't always assume it's like happening to you. It could be happening for you. Like I was so bummed this week, COVID, I missed two speaking engagements and another event that I was really looking forward to. But then I kept thinking, well, for whatever reason, maybe I just wasn't meant to be there this week. And, at least now I'm gonna be okay for our conference next month,
Right.
that's out of the way. So, it's really about how you frame things. And it's like our brain wants to categorize everything. It shortcuts it right to good or bad. And it's like once you realize that that is something that our brains just do, and you just kind of allow, like this book sounds like it does, it's just like kind of surrender, surrender. This shit's gonna happen, folks. And we kind of just gotta surrender to it and see where the opportunities lie and what all unfolds from it, because you kind of never know what was really meant to be all along. I love that. I'm so checking that out. I did want to back up for just a second really quickly, and I wanted to kind of hear a little bit. I want to dig in for just a second deeper on kind of the hustle and going against the grind. It is very much going against the grain, because I do feel like, in venture capital especially, it's like a space where things, they want high growth, right? They want high growth, high return. I'm kind of curious, like, how have you been able to sort of meet in the middle with those kinds of conversations when you are, if you have people that you're coaching or mentoring that are in that kind of high growth, high stakes business type of situation, but they really do want to maintain that balance and wellness. Like, it almost feels like, I don't know, it's definitely a culture thing within venture capital, but it feels like something you just have to automatically surrender. Maybe this is just me making assumptions, but it kind of feels like the case.
Yeah. It's definitely a culture thing, but it's shifting. And I think kind of what you were sharing with on purpose, Amy, same with like who you do business with. I feel like we're getting into a space where
Mhm.
you really can, it takes some work, but there are people out there in just about every space that probably align with your values
Yeah.
because, kind of like Ariana Huffington talks about, right? Her experience with
Yes.
literally ended up in the hospital and like passing out and hitting the floor because she was so
Yeah.
exhausted and kept working. And
Mhm.
so there are enough people out there who are starting to be vocal
Yeah.
about these experiences and how detrimental it is. The research has never been better.
Mm.
And so I like to lean on that is the one thing I'll say about venture capitalists is like they
Yeah.
like data and facts and
Yeah.
same in tech. And
Yeah.
so I try to really lean on that's what I love about Holistic Hustler, where I say the mindfulness meets the flow state coaching and the neuroscience,
I love it.
because we really bring in the research.
Mhm.
And when you sit down and have conversations, because a lot of that pressure in VC is on the founders, but it does start with the VCs and the LPs and the folks that are funding. And there's all this pressure of like, what does it mean to be a CEO at a high growth startup, right? And it's
Mhm.
this image in your mind of like what you look like and what you have to do and,
Yeah.
all the things. And we really sit down and talk about the impact of overwork. And one of the facts I share a lot is around the law of diminishing returns that says after we work 50 hours a week, it's the same as the economic principle, right? We are
Mhm.
no longer getting the same level of output for an input level of time. And
Yeah.
so we talk through those things. Then some of it's practical, which is like, think about how you feel on 3 hours of sleep
Mhm.
You've been drinking alcohol all
Yeah.
night the night before, and then you get up the next morning, you pound a coffee, like, is that the person that you want making
Yeah.
financial decisions for your company, right? You
Good
feel
point.
awful. Not
Right.
saying that we can't do it when we have to do it, but should
Right.
that be the norm?
Yep.
What does that cause? You're probably more triggered when you work
Mhm.
with not only your investors, but your employees. It's gonna impact company morale. Like, we start to really unpack,
Yeah.
what the impacts are, and then we look at the fact that, like, in a high growth startup in any company, you're looking at a 7 to 10-year, right,
Yeah.
marathon. It's not a short journey. You're not
No.
coming in, right? It's multiple rounds. It's gonna be all this change. We need
Yeah.
resilient leaders. And so what does it actually mean to be a resilient leader?
Mm. Yeah.
And so being able to just shift the conversations that way, I have
Mhm.
found helpful.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, there's still the stigma, I think, in corporate spaces around mental health. Now we
Yeah.
want to talk about supporting people through mental health, but it still seems to only be thought of when you're at extreme distress.
Right.
So it's like, oh yeah,
Breaking
we have
point.
if something's like wrong, definitely go to therapy. We pay for therapy. It's like, that's great. But I'm talking about, are your employees well? Right?
Mhm.
Are they well? And before we kicked off the podcast today, Amy and I were chatting. I was sharing how there's this new research that's come out in a warning from the US Attorney General
Yep.
because 41% of parents, and this research is from the American Psychological Association, but
Mhm.
41% of parents say that they are so stressed
Yep.
that they can't function on most days.
Yep.
And so, not shocking, right? I don't think any of us are shocked,
None of us
but then
parents
it
are, no.
but how do our work cultures, and they're actually calling it out, how do our
Yeah.
work cultures support us actually
Mhm.
being well? And so
Yeah.
I like to try to take the conversation from that lens.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, sometimes using mental health or
Yeah.
even using mindfulness and certain words just trigger the wrong. It's like, no, we're actually talking about you want
Right.
high performance, you
Yep.
need employees to do more with less. Let's actually give them tools to be successful and get it done. And it starts with
Mhm.
having whole, healthy people. You don't get a good worker without a whole healthy person. And
Nope.
so let's
Yep.
go there first. And then, you really work with people, we track the progress, and then you kind of build this case. Start usually with a small group and over time we expand it. But that's what I've found to be the most effective and getting little change agents in there too. So
Mhm.
like people like you, Amy, and hopefully your listeners, we all go in and if we can get even one person on one team to give us the
Mhm.
space to show how this type of an approach to what like well-being as a foundation of high performance works, then at some point they're gonna be like, wow, you're getting so much more done. I don't care how you're getting it done.
Right?
And then I need more of that. And then the team. And
Yes.
so we become the change we want to see. And so
Yep.
that is how I'm trying to evangelize those messages and tackle grind culture.
Yeah. I'm so glad you brought that article up. I shared the link as well in the live chat for our live listeners to take a look at. I agree. I think it's fantastic ammo to have that conversation. I know it was also backed by the Surgeon General as well. So I mean, there's it's like legit science and studies and years of research that are going behind this. And to know that most parents aren't able to function on any given workday because of the lack of maybe either mental health care or support that they need for childcare, child rearing, and all of this stuff that we're dealing with on a day-to-day basis as parents. If you've got school age kids, ton of situations and fears there. We just had the another school shooting in Georgia. It takes a toll on us, and it's like, how are we meant to, continue to function when you get a text like I did last week saying your kid's school is locked down and you don't know why yet, and you're gonna have to just wait. And you're not with your children. It's absolutely terrifying. It's a different world that we live in with a whole new set of instances of things that we have to deal with and inputs that I don't know that our parents maybe had to deal with as much, And so I think learning how to find tools, I realize it's going to take time and effort from folks like us, Brooke, to in these kinds of conversations. And those of you who are listening and will take this information and kind of bring it into your own spaces. It's going to take time, but the best place to always start, right, is kind of with what we can control, right? And that's within ourselves. So I'm kind of curious as you kind of started to prioritize your own wellness, what were some of the mind shifts or mindset shifts and practical steps that you began to take to help integrating self-care practice into your daily life and work as somebody who was kind of in this, high pressured, very busy space?
Definitely. So first, I would say I had to almost redefine my definition of self-care a little bit
Mhm.
because I think for me, I was definitely doing a lot of surface soothing is kind of what we call
Ooh,
it.
I like that. I like it.
And so, do you know, kind of just scratching that
Oh,
surface
yeah.
at almost like putting a band-aid on it, and like,
Mhm.
oh, I'm going to go out and enjoy a nice meal, or maybe I'm going to get a massage or just do something for like temporary relief in the moment. And then I was
Mhm.
labeling that as self care, which is nothing wrong with that. Like, that is a form
Sure.
of self care. And sometimes that can also help us get into a state where we can actually relax, right? Sometimes we need a catalyst. People go on vacation or like, it takes me 2 days before I'm actually relaxed enough to
Right?
enjoy.
Yeah.
So, not knocking those practices, but for me to actually get to restorative rest, right?
Mhm.
It had to go a level deeper. And so that's when I started adding different tools to my self care kit, like meditation, like going for walks and just being out in nature.
Yes.
I'm also a spiritual person. So having that time to really explore my spirituality and journal. And like I've even done before, it's called, mindful coloring, and
Oh,
so I
yeah.
have a
Same.
coloring book where I just you do that too? It's
Oh, yeah. I got a great, like, gel pen ink set. Imma send you the link because they just color on
please
so
do.
smooth. It's so soothing. I've gotten a lot of my friends hooked on them. Continue, please. Sorry.
Not because you learn people are like, "Oh my gosh, you just sit there and color," but you learn so much about yourselves. I've even done it with
Yes.
leaders, and
Mhm.
as you color and you can do it I kinda do guided.
Yeah.
It's like, what are you noticing about the choices that you make, right? Are you
Mm.
choosing to color fast and furious, but you're spilling some things out of the line? Are you
Yeah.
more meticulous and you want it kind of but those
Yeah.
choices that we make are actually the same choices that we typically make in life and in business, right? And so
I
you learn
love
a lot
it.
about yourself doing it. And
Agreed.
so for me, it's those practices. But on top of that, it's also and so I recognize too that a lot of place that my journey probably and I'm still early in my journey, but sometimes I'm further along than other folks. And so I also like to bring in really tactical things. For me, it's about really living my values as well. And
Mhm.
so every day I challenge myself to live what I believe, to live my purpose. I have a lot of faith and trust that the universe, my higher self, God, whatever you believe, is
Yeah.
also helping guide that action because I'm so present and in purpose. And so
Mhm.
I live from that place. Now, tactically, on the flow state high performance side, there are a couple things that I like to pull in that help with success, and I'll share some of these concepts, and then we would definitely have to dig into them later, Amy, because some of them are going to go so against the grain
I love it. I'm
of
ready.
what we think. So the one that I found that was the most startling but effective, is what I kind of refer to as work compression.
Okay.
And so there's all this research out there now that says that work expands to fill the time we have available for it. And so if you give something 3 hours of time, the work is gonna expand to fill 3 hours of time. This is why in a lot of moments when we procrastinate things, we somehow get it done, right? Right on
Right.
time because we've given ourselves just about right squeeze to get it
Yep.
done. And so the work compression strategy is saying right off the gate, you cut the amount of hours that you work by 25%. So if you're working an 8-hour workday, now you're working a 6-hour workday, and we put very hard start and stop times around it. Now I recognize this strategy is definitely easier for knowledge-based workers
Mhm.
than if you're in like something that's like an hourly service job, but the same
Right.
principles can apply to things in your personal life, whether it's cleaning time and all the other things you can still apply these strategies to. But by forcing that compression, and you have to commit to very hard start and stop times, you don't go beyond it. And this is kind of the coaching and guidance that I do. And you can see why community is so important.
Yeah.
But you force yourself to use other inputs. And so we get stuck in this mindset that one input of time equals one unit of output.
Mm.
And it's just not true, right? But by thinking that, the only thing we do is we dial up time, right? Like I need more output. What am I going to do? More time, more time, more time, more time. We totally forget about all these other outputs, or I'm sorry, inputs that are available to us, like creativity, all these things that are just underutilized because we
Yeah.
over index on time. And
Mhm.
so, kind of similar to your senses, if one of your senses goes out, the other ones become kind of stronger. And so, work compression is like a forcing function to start to force us to rely on other inputs to get things done. And so it's painful for like the first week or two because
Yeah.
you're just out of your norm Do you know what I mean? And you're so
Yep.
used to overworking, or you're so used to one more call, but once you
One
actually
more
commit
email.
one more email, but you'd be amazed at how you start to get more creative about solving problems. And like,
Yeah.
even this week we're actually launching a new mini course. So I'm actually teaching this in this new mini course we're launching next week. And so we're working through all the materials and the content and the workbooks and all the things together. Um, and something that I wanted to spend XYZ amount of time on, it got reduced by an hour, right? I have an 8-month-old at home. That happens. You might even can hear him crying in the background somewhere. That happens frequently.
Yeah.
But guess what, Amy? I got in there. I got my draft done. I actually leveraged ChatGPT and a couple AI tools, pulled it together, made the tweaks, and I got it done. But you have to use that forcing function sometimes
Yeah.
to experience those benefits. And so tools like work compression, we talk about like a really effective power down ritual to get yourself into a place
Yes.
of rest and to set yourself up for success the next day. And so a lot
Love
of
that.
times we get stuck ruminating,
Yep.
about all the things we have to do and, oh, I got to do this and that. But if we have a good power down routine where we actually clear all the small things off our plate, we set our day up for tomorrow, we get our goal direct to actions, like the most important things that we can be doing are on the calendar first. We give ourselves dedicated time to do it. Those kind of practices alongside the work of purpose, getting reconnected with yourself. But now we're changing how we work. Wow, right? Huge effects. There's other tools in there I could talk about.
I love it.
The only other one I'll share super quick is around how we think about cognitive load, because a lot of times we think ignoring something or making small decisions don't take a toll on us, when in fact you should think about it like as if your brain, your cognitive system, every time you ignore something or make a tiny decision, it's like lifting a weight.
Yeah. That's
And
a
so
great
you wonder why in
analogy.
the mornings we feel so clear, and then in the afternoons we're getting groggy and we're tired. We
Yeah.
make over 200 decisions a day just on food. And
Ah.
so, and everybody I talk to, I know I get so stressed about food decisions.
Oh,
Everybody I
yeah.
talk to is like, me too. I hate it. Deciding what to eat
This
is
is
the
why I get
worst
so
thing of the
triggered
day.
when my husband comes home and is like, "What's for dinner?" I'm like, "Bah! I don't want to decide one more thing. I'm
No. And so
done."
part of what we do is around how can we eliminate some of these decisions that are actually kind of predictable. So
Yeah.
instead of ruminating around unproductive stuff like food, or
Yeah.
you get up in the morning and it's like, am I going to drink water first? Or do I need to go to the bathroom? Or do I want to shower? Like we work through eliminating all of those really small, kind of irrelevant,
Yeah.
decisions, and we try to automate them. And like, but by doing so, you reduce your cognitive load. And so
Yes.
while you're in those moments, you're actually getting a much better,
Mhm.
work product, more creative. It's easier to get into flow states.
Oh, yeah.
All of these things happen. And so those are some of the more tactical tools on the
I love it.
neuroscience side that we bring in alongside the mindfulness.
Yeah, we talk a lot about productivity within Together Digital too. Again, a lot of high achieving, hardworking ladies, and we do laud productivity is like something that's to be of value in our society for sure. But at the end of the day, too, like it's I think it's really essential to understand like your productivity style and that your ways of being productive are not the same as everyone else's. And what you were just speaking of reminded me of this like philosophy and guidance I was given that was all about eat the frog, which sounds really disgusting because that's what it's meant to sound like. It's like a Mark Twain quote, I believe. It's like the first thing you should do when you wake up in the morning is eat the frog. And like you were saying, all of those little decisions that you're making throughout the day, all of those other things, the smaller nap tasks that you use to check off your list when you're avoiding the big, ugly thing that you just need, you have to do to push the needle forward, do that first. So if that's exercise for you, if the frog is exercise, then make it exercise first thing when you wake up. That way it's like you eat the frog and it's like there's no other decisions to make. And that's the first choice of the day. And then it's done. And then it frees you up to be able to focus on all the other things. And that could also be, other things within like work as well. But I just use the workout as an example because I know that's a big thing for some.
I
But
love that.
yeah,
And if I can add one thing on
sure.
that we do, that I think even in the eat the frog, which I really like that.
Right.
It's research proven that like if you take the first step
Hmm.
in the action that you're going to do the night before, you're much more likely to do it.
Oh, okay.
And
That's good to know.
That's
Yeah,
part of the power down routine is we're going to take
I
the
love
very first
that.
step of the, so if tomorrow, what I need to do in my, like, if like, and that's your flow time. We always talk about our flow time before noon, before
Mhm.
you're starting to get kind of weighed down. If
Yeah.
it's, I've got to work on a deck, go ahead and open the presentation, name it, have it open. So when you sit down at your
Yeah.
computer, I don't have
So
to think
smart.
about getting started. Workout
It's the right
outfit, lay
thing.
it out. When I get up, I don't have to think about picking an outfit out.
Yep.
Whatever that thing is, you take the first step.
I love
And
that.
it's amazing, it's
It's good
how
advice.
how the mind works, like, subconsciously, but it helps you
Hack
get
your own
going
brain.
a lot more, I know.
Right? That's so cool. I love this so much. Yeah, and also when you were talking about power down, it reminded me of that work commute. I think a lot of us have lost that working from home. We don't have that decompression between work and home anymore when we kind of shift like sitting in the car 15, 20 minutes, hour, 40 minutes, however long your drive might have been before. If you're working from home now, more often than not, like you kind of lost that. I love the idea of the power down. All right, let's bust some myths here for a moment. What are some common misconceptions and myths that people have about what it takes to achieve success and fulfillment in their careers?
Ooh. What are some myths? The first one is always that working hard means that we will get ahead.
Mm,
Um, doesn't mean that hard work is not required, but it's not just hard work. And that's what I'm saying. Just let's debunk this myth that time is the only input that gets us output. And I think if we
mm,
can debunk that, then now we
yeah.
open ourselves up to a lot of different ways of what success can look like.
Ah, time is the only input that gets us output. Yep. Writing that one down and adding it to my sticky notes that live around my computer to look at every day to remind me when I'm tired. I'm like, really is like 20 more minutes sitting here staring at my screen going, what else needs to be done? Or do I need to spend the time making my list for tomorrow? I love it. All
That's a
right.
big one. If I could add one more in there,
Yeah,
I would just
please.
say believing that we don't have control or
Mm,
buying into this mentality of one day win.
mhm.
Like, oh, if I just suffer for another 5 years, then I'll be
Right.
able to get off the path. If I just, and because we trick ourselves to actually missing out on life, right? When
Mm,
we live in that space, right? There is no
yeah.
guarantee that we're going to reach one day win.
Right.
And oh, by the way, if you've lived, some years, right?
Yeah.
You're going to know that when you get to that point, if you're looking in the future, there's always the next point you're going to be looking for.
Always.
And so
Yeah.
we have to break that mentality of one day win and actually
Yes.
recognize, yeah, we actually have a lot of control over our lives right
Mhm.
now. And that doesn't mean you can just quit your job, right? Like,
Right.
because like, oh, I hate my job, I can just quit it. Actually, technically you could, but I'm not necessarily saying encourage that, but you could do that,
Yeah.
but you do have power to start changing your circumstances. And
Mhm.
so I just like to make sure we remember the power that we actually have,
Yeah.
to rethink how we want to achieve
Mm.
success.
Yeah. I love it. Like, yeah, I think a lot of us don't, again, it's just this whole, I think, I don't know, there's a word for it, like where it's kind of like all about how society in general thinks about a certain narrative and whatnot. So that kind of lives within our collective minds that it's like that we don't always necessarily see life as a series of summits and high points and low points. And it's like, but that is life. Like that's just kind of what it's going to
Yeah.
be. There's no ultimate pinnacle. This is it. I've reached the top. I'll never, I mean, really, I hope that's never the case because I don't know where you go from there, really. I mean, but we're always going to be wanting for because we're human by nature. We want to know what's next. We want to go to the next thing. That's why you see these serial entrepreneurs and people owning multiple businesses and moving from one industry even into another sometimes because it's a number of chapters and stages in a series of summits that we're all kind of working through. So I love that reminder that it's ever not ever one destination. Um, it's definitely about the journey, like all those motivational posters told us.
It is. It's so
So I'm
true.
curious, you've got a lot going on. You've got a little one and you're running a business. What ways are you finding that you're able to model in your own life as an entrepreneur and a leader that balance between productivity and wellness?
Definitely. I'd say the biggest one is honestly grace
Mm,
for what shows up in front of us. And so that goes back to that feeling like constantly coming back to surrender.
yeah.
Right. And so, saying this morning, I woke up, baby had a blowout,
Yeah.
smile on his face. but immediately
They're
into
so
the
cute.
bath. And so that's like, oh, there's 30 minutes gone. Do you know that I thought I'd have? And then
Yeah.
our nanny's daughter is sick. And so she's out today. And it's like, well, and I've got to get on with Amy and like, but in those moments, what do? We can panic, right? We can be triggered. We can get
Right.
upset. We can get frustrated, or we can say, you know what? This is what's showing up for me today. And I'm
Yeah.
going to,
Yeah.
respond. And guess what? Everything's going to be okay.
Mhm.
And so, like, I didn't get a chance to meditate this morning because of that. It's okay. I'll try to get it in later this afternoon, but it's just that grace. And
Mhm.
every day knowing it's another chance to be better. So if I don't get it today, then guess
Yes.
what? I wake up tomorrow and it's another chance to be better and continue to have that focus on what I want life to look and feel like for me. And
Mhm.
so I
Yeah.
think that is the most important thing. And probably second, just for me, is really staying aligned to my purpose.
Mhm.
It's so hard to man, with just society and what shows up for us. I think especially in US culture, you're fighting against conditioning, one
Yeah.
that you've lived through your whole life, but that's constantly coming at you,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
From TV and pop culture and all the messages. It's just
Yeah.
some days I come home and I'm just like, I just need some silence and
Yeah.
some peace to get my thoughts together. And so it's understanding that, recognizing maybe in the moment when you start to get on that path, not letting yourself spiral. Do
Yeah.
you know what I
That
mean?
cycle.
Kind of like you
Mhm.
have a bad day and you can feel it early in the morning. You're like, I'm going to have a bad day. And then you have a bad day.
Yeah.
Right. And I had a day like that. Maybe it was like right after we got back where I was like, I am feeling all the tunes of a bad day. What used to be the old method, right? What did I used to do?
Yeah.
Maybe go eat some junk food, maybe have a cocktail, just all these things that are not healthy or productive at all. What did I do this time? I recognized in the moment what was happening.
Love
I
it.
actually went to Tropical Smoothie and got myself a
Yeah.
smoothie. And then
Love
I
it.
sat on the car and I meditated for like
Mm.
30 minutes. And I did one and I was like, that feels good. And I was like, let me do another. And guess what?
Mhm.
Within an hour, back on track. And
Right?
so for it's those interventions in the moment, but you can't do them if you're not present.
Oh,
But that has
there.
made all the difference in the world for me of not
Mhm.
allowing myself to get, because I'm still very ambitious. I'm
Mhm.
not as competitive as I used to be because I
Sure.
just am in a space of abundance where I
Yeah.
know what's for me, what's for you will
Yep.
happen for us. There's no scarcity out there. We can
Yes.
all win.
Mhm.
I used to not feel that way, and I think that's also sales culture.
Yeah.
So I don't feel that level of competitiveness, but I'm still ambitious with big goals. But I just have this innate trust that, hey, I've done the best I could today, and that is going to take me exactly where I need to be.
I love it so much. And I love that you're modeling such great, like, just human leadership in that way. Because I think a part of the hustle culture sometimes is leaders who seem, unwavering and untouchable, and nothing ever happens to them. And they don't have bad days. And they have all this. And oftentimes, sometimes they do, depending on the leadership, have privilege and all these things. It's like, okay, it's so nice to have people who show up as human as possible, while still strong and resilient, like you said, as leaders, to let people know that, yeah, like, literally, blowouts happen, shit happens, and then we kinda just have to figure out how to move on with our day because it happens to all of us,
Right.
and it's really how we respond and react to all of that. I think that's so important to model, not just for, like, the leader or for us as leaders, but for our own families, for our own children, if we're happy, if we happen to be bringing up kids as well. All right, you
Definitely.
work on coaching executives. What are some of the most impactful strategies that you've seen for organizations to foster healthier, more sustainable work cultures?
Well, that's a big topic.
It is.
That's a
I know. And
huge
we're coming
topic.
close to
Culture,
time
I
too.
know.
Sorry.
Culture is so important. The number one and most important thing you can do is exactly what you said, Amy, which is model top down behavior.
Yep.
And so literally in a coaching circle I was doing with a group of women CEOs, there was one woman there, and I just like to share stories, who
Yeah.
shared that she was working 70 hours a week, but that was down from working like 80 or 90 hours a week. So for
Golly.
her, she was like, that's an improvement. And I know I can't do it for forever,
Yeah.
but like, I just feel like this is the only way I can get done what I need to get done in this moment. And she was
Mhm.
still leading one startup and launching something else. And so there was a lot going on, but she's like, I just don't know another way. But I don't want my leaders to do this. Like, I don't want my leaders at my company. I don't want my employees to do this. I want
Yeah.
them to rest. I don't want
Mhm.
them to be well. I don't want them burning out. And so, how can I do that? We had to have an honest conversation of like, guess what? They are modeling
Yeah.
what they see from you, whether you say it or not.
Yeah.
You give them permission to give in to burnout and overwork because that's how you model what success looks like. And so
Yeah.
the first step in any organization, it was the same with another leader I coached in the employee surveys. It came out that the employees didn't feel comfortable talking to management about their workload being too heavy.
Yep.
And he was like, I have a close relationship with my employees. Why is it that they can't come talk to me about it? And it's like, but were you not the one, sir, who worked during your whole maternity leave?
Yeah.
Like, and then you want, and so it's like, oh, but, and so it's those conversations of how are we modeling it first, but then it's also then get into the place of giving people understanding. You hit on this, Amy, with your team. We all work differently. We all have a different definition of productivity. And
Mhm.
how do we create spaces that allow everyone,
Yeah.
to not just show up authentically, but really work the way that works best within, obviously within the realm of, how we have to work as a team.
Yeah.
And so an example of that, I had a sales leader in my career earlier that would send me emails about deals, instant messages going off on Slack, text messages, phone calls. No, right? Like
Yeah.
so OD with communication that you're constantly here, you're constantly being interrupted, right?
Right.
And you just can't work that way. And so you have to create a culture and spaces where people can actually set healthy boundaries
Yes.
for how they show up best. And then you have to honor them. And I
Yeah.
guess the third thing I would share just really quickly is get into a place where you really prioritize and start to realize not everything is urgent,
Yeah.
right? Like
We're not saving lives.
so many
I
things
mean,
that
most
aren't
of us.
urgent, right?
Yeah.
And they
Yeah.
dilute the things that are urgent.
Mm.
Right? And so it's not that like occasionally you might have to do something for, for an
Yeah.
urgent situation, but when it's every single day,
Right.
now what does urgent even mean, right? We're completely spilling
Mm.
outside of the boundaries. Like, and now that's our new normal. It's not urgent. And
Yes.
so just reshifting the mindset on priorities and
Mhm.
how those are passed down,
Yep.
and giving employees the permission to say, hey, if you need this by Wednesday, like tomorrow, then I have these other things that I've been working on. So what needs to shift, right?
Yep.
So that we can get this done.
To free this
Being
up.
You
Love
got
it.
to have those conversations with people, and
Yeah.
just those 3 things go such a long way in shifting the culture.
Yeah, I love it. Fantastic answer. A hot tip though, for all of you, like again, if you're a business owner, I get it. You're up late at night, you're thinking of random things. You can schedule Slack messages and emails. So you're not sending emails in the middle of the night and Slack messages. And I have done this in the past where I'll think of something and I'm like, oh my gosh, Kaylee, we need to make sure we get this done tomorrow because it just popped into my head randomly. And I will just schedule it as a Slack for the next morning at 9 a.m. or 10 AM, like, when I know that she's likely to be on. So it doesn't always feel like I'm, like, there in the middle of the night. Like, sometimes I forget because 'cause I'm half asleep, but I really try to practice that of, like, scheduling the email or scheduling the
Yeah.
Slack message to send at normal business hours because sometimes you can't help the thoughts. You wanna take action when you can take action so you can go back to sleep, you know? But also at the same time, like you said, you model that behavior, so much. All right, folks, we're coming up on time. If any of our live listeners have any questions for Brooke, feel free to drop them into the chat. I know we had Elizabeth said she was listening from Indiana, sorry, from Greenwood. So if you have any questions, let us know, Elizabeth. But we're going to jump ahead to our power round questions. So these are our lightning round questions. These are kind of a fun chance to get to know you just a little bit better still, Brooke, although we get to know you even more here in the next month. Just curious, are you a morning person or a night owl?
Definitely a night owl.
Are you? All right. All right. I think it's always good to know like your circadian rhythms. There's just some kind of unlock that happens and acknowledging that in like not just yourself, but your coworkers and partners and family. And this actually helped us with sleep training. I learned my husband very much the night owl, me, the morning person. Perfect match for dealing with a baby that's awake all night, as we were discussing before this too. All right. What is your go-to or favorite wellness practice?
Definitely meditation.
Yeah. I love it. I love it. Yeah, for those of you who are afraid to try it, just be graceful. Give yourself grace and just try it. Try walking meditation, try different kinds of meditations, see what works for you. I agree. It's one of my favorite go-tos. It's better than coffee in the
Changes my
afternoon.
I was gonna say it changes my whole day. Like the minute
Yes.
I especially some of the guided ones, the minute I
Yep.
open my eyes and kind of come back, my
Mhm.
outlook on the day has
It's a new
dramatically
day.
shifted. Yeah,
It's a
it's
new
amazing.
day. I used to do it in the middle of the afternoon and a little huddle at my agency, and that was my afternoon coffee was to go and just hide and meditate for 20 minutes in one of those huddles. All right, best career advice you've ever received?
Ooh, if you're in a corporate company, it was around knowing the currency of that company
Oh,
and
I love it.
then making sure that you are participating in that currency. And so a lot of times it's relationships, might not
Yeah,
be at everyone, but like how do things get done here? How do people get ahead? And then starting to play that game.
that's fantastic. I love it. All right, last question. And then if we don't have any questions from our audience, we will wrap it up. What is one thing that you're most passionate about outside of your work?
Ooh. Well, I'll put all the work stuff in a bucket. So I won't even talk about the equitable access to VC because that's a huge passion for mine.
That's awesome.
But just on the fun side, it's actually dance. I grew up dancing like tap, jazz,
That's so cool.
ballet, danced in college. I danced competitively, and now I coach dance for
Mhm.
fun. It was actually one of the things I had given up at a
Yeah.
certain point because I was just so burned out and exhausted. But as of last year, I've been able to bring that back into my life, and I absolutely love it.
Ugh, I love it. Yeah, bringing that passion back. I love it. I think that's always a telltale sign for me is my husband asked me about 6, 7 years ago before I came into this role was, are you ever gonna have any hobbies? And I was like, "Oh, I don't have any hobbies." But now ask me, and it's very different. It's like hiking, it's yoga, it's the adult coloring, it's meditation, it's travel, it's yeah, it's so many reading. Oh my god, I've been reading so much. So excited to grab the book that you recommended, The Surrender Experiment. But yes, I think that's a great way to kind of wrap for the day. I hope all of you that are listening have taken something helpful away from all of this. I think all of this is such a relevant continuing conversation. It's been kind of a theme throughout our last few episodes. So, if you can't get enough of this stuff, keep listening. Take a listen back to the one we're going to publish here soon with Tyann. Talked a lot about this as well because it's all interconnected, right? Our ability to achieve what we feel is success, our own personal defined success, has so much to do with, like you said, us being able to show up, feel well, and feel whole. And as you know, it's as much for you, Brooke. I think it's a passion for me to help people find that fulfillment and feel that because we all deserve that. So, thank you so much for coming on today and sharing all of your wisdom.
Absolutely. It was great. Thank you for having me, Amy. And I'm so excited to see you in person and meet the
Same.
community in just a couple of weeks. It's coming
Ugh,
up
I
fast.
know it's going to be fantastic. It's going to be a wonderful day. All right. Well, thanks everybody for listening. And until then, until we see you next week, everyone keep asking, keep giving, and keep growing. See you then.